to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show. My name is Philip Tarrant. I'm the editor of Smart Property Investment, also a property investor. Today I am joined by regular guest Alex Whitlock, who is the group publisher at Sterling Publishing. We also have a special guest, Steve O'Keefe. You might know the name. He's a cricketer. And I'm going to be up front from the start and tell everyone that I don't know much about cricket. But Steve, mate, I really enjoy you coming along. I think it's great to have you here just to share your insights in terms of your journey as a property investor and how you've been able to manage a pretty full-on professional life matched with creating some wealth through property. So, guys, thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What I know about cricket, and I used to go there as a kid, is that when they used to serve full-strength beer there, now there's only half-strength beer, so I don't go anymore. It's really sort of killed it for me. But
surely now you're in the boxes, aren't you, where they serve the full-strength stuff, so you'll be fine.
Well, mate, if they've got salmon on, that little brown bed with, some canapes and all that sort of stuff, that's me these days.
They certainly do these days, so you'll be fine.
They've got it pretty good. But you've been at the game in cricket for quite some time now. I know you play your local club's Manly, but you've played at elite level, both New South Wales and Australia. Mate, tell us where you are with your career right now and how busy that's keeping you.
Yeah, look, I've been certainly fortunate enough to be able to play cricket from about the age of 22 to where I am now, or 21, so 10 years as a contracted member of New South Wales. I've been extremely privileged, travelled around the world, been able to represent Australia and my job is to chase a little red ball around an oval. So, I feel extremely humbled and privileged that that's been my job, so to speak. I've also studied as well and got a PE teaching degree. Not that necessarily I want to go back and look after kids when I'm finished cricket, but, it's good to have that in the back pocket. But from about the age of 24, 25, we won a Champions League tour going to India. And I was the 16th bloke in a 15-man squad. I was never going to play, but the way that it works and the way that cricket guys are, when you win a large tournament, you split the prize money evenly amongst 15. So I seriously felt like I'd sort of won lottery, and it was about 100 grand. And at the time, I was probably only on about sort of 40 grand as a cricketer, 40, 50 grand. And I thought, well, I got this large lump sum of cash. What am I going to do with it? And the thoughts cross your mind as you do as a youngster. Sort of, do I want to buy a car? Do I want to waste on holidays? And we'd had a couple of guys come through and speak to us. Looking back now, they're probably property spruikers. These guys come through and spoke to us about property and leverage and using other people's money, and that sort of triggered in my mind as a way of maybe, if I'm going to play cricket for a long time, maybe creating wealth outside of that. So that's sort of what spawned the idea of getting into property, and I used that money to buy an investment, and ever since then, I've been keen, actively in the market, looking at more and more properties and trying to build that wealth, I guess.
Let's have a chat about your portfolio, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How many investment properties have you got right now?
Sitting on 10. It got to 11 and I've sold one. So at the moment, 10, yeah.
That's a pretty substantial portfolio. And what sort of, over what period have you been buying?
24. So 2010, I bought my first one. I guess I was a bit naive and easily led, but I bought a property off the plan in Melton West, which is 35 k's west of Melbourne. And look, it all went well. The construction went well, and it's still renting out today, and I still hold it. But I probably paid 20 or 30 grand over what it was worth at the time, which probably went straight in the back pocket of everyone else, which happens. But for me, that was a better investment than buying a flash car and whatnot. So started out with that one in Melton West when I was 25, and now to 31, finishing buying 4 properties in Brisbane.
Okay.
And it's sitting me at 10, and mostly along the way I've used buyers agents. I've probably been hit and miss with those guys as well. But, the last sort of 3 that I bought in Brisbane through Pure Property and a friend of mine, Paul Glossop, have been really good from start to finish. And I think I'll continue to go that way.
So you're investing up in Brizzy now because Paul's recommending that that's the place to be?
Oh, yeah, look, it's not necessarily what Paul recommends. I think I do a little bit of research in the background. I'll read the magazines and get a feel of what people generally think is a good investing area, and then I'll go to someone who may be an expert in that area who I perceive, and I've learnt my time now. I'll go and ask a lot of property buyers agents what they think or what their feel is, and for me it's a lot about relationships with those people, and if I get along with them and they seem to be reiterating the same points that I'm thinking, then I'll go along that path. And I went with a brief to Paul about this is the area and he did his research, come back with 3 properties that he'd found, and were all under what I perceived and what he perceived as under market value, and they ran out, neutrally geared, and for me they're great properties just to set and forget and hopefully look at in 15 years and make a little bit of money out of.
That's good. And sort of moving forward, obviously you're investing in property for creating wealth. Is that essentially that's the reason why you're doing it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I come from a bit of a humble family. My parents are battlers who live out at Richmond, and we grew up in a five-row house, and they bought their house for 90 grand, I think, and I saw how hard they had to work to get where they've gotten to, which is just paying their house off this year, which is 25 years later or whatever, and they're happily retired. The property's gone through the roof in Sydney. Again, seeing that property grow in value, it was interesting to see, but also seeing how hard they have to work for 40 years. My dad was in the RAF for 40 years, slugging it out, and he absolutely loved his job. But for me, that was sort of a trigger to go, right, don't waste what you got. I've been given this job, which is, really well paying. It won't last forever. Be smart with your money now, and at the back end, even though I don't realise it now, hopefully, I'll have something to show for it. So originally it was just to pay off my own house, which I bought, or unit. That was my main goal. If I could have that paid off at the end of cricket, that I'd consider that a really good career. With a uni degree under my belt, house paid off, it's a good head start. Now that I've probably gotten to that point, and I've still got maybe 3 or 4 years left, I'm looking at passive income by the time I get to 45, which is 14 years away. And I'm hoping, somewhere between 80 and 100 grand, I think is reasonable and achievable. And I'm giving myself that extra, 15 years to achieve that.
Steve, I'd just like to take you back a second to that first purchase, the $100,000 you got to invest. What other things were you considering at the time? Obviously, you got some guys who come along to talk to you about property, but what other things were you thinking about? And what really sort of tipped you into property?
Oh, I was thinking about a Range Rover Sport, to be honest. That was my main preference. To be honest, I'd lived with a couple of investment bankers, and they'd talk to me about, they managed private wealth at Macquarie, and they'd talk to me about maybe getting into shares. But to me, when you do the sums in your head, when you've got that lump of money, so it was 100 grand originally, it broken down 50 after tax, so it was 50 grand. I was like, well, I could use that 50 into shares. That grows at 10%, you make 5 grand. But you throw 50 grand into a $300,000 property, it only has to grow by 1% to get you the same value back. Obviously, you've got costs getting in and getting out, but I was like, this only has to perform at sort of 3 to 4% over the next 15 years, and it won't double, but it'll make a lot more money return on it, and that was what basically swayed my thought process.
So you looked at the development. It was an off-the-plan purchase.
Mm-hmm.
What did you buy? How many beds was it?
It was a 4-bedroom house. So Melton West, they'd released a whole bunch of land out there, and I got given the flashy brochure, which appealed to me straight away as a youngster. Oh, this looks great. It's got all the nice fittings, and a 20-page document on how Melton West is going to be the next big thing in the whole country. It's in the great plan, a scheme of things, the Melbourne, the 5 areas that they're going to target to pump a lot of money into. And again, I sort of had it pushing towards me. The land was 115 grand, and I was like, well, stuff it. Worst case is, I've always dealt with worst case. Worst case is this house doesn't get built. I get cheated out of my money. I go back and live with mum and dad. I can handle that. So I've always thought that worst case scenario isn't too bad. Have a punt. It's a bit of an educated punt, but that's sort of my risk profile.
And it's still in your portfolio now. What's that property worth now? What sort of gains you made on that particular investment?
So I'm getting it valued actually at the moment, but I had a real estate agent ring me and say that they could put it on the market for say $370. So I paid $320 for it.
Okay.
Plus 10 grand in extras. So you had your mortgage insurance. So I'm probably in for $330. And it'll probably be worth about sort of $360 if they were to sell it. So they reckon they could get $375, but I don't think they'll get that high. And I'd be happy with, looking around and my comparison sales and whatever, I think 360. And the bank's valuing it at the moment so I can get an idea of where it is. So in that sort of time, we're looking at 6 years, looking at probably a gain of from 320, so 40 grand. You can look at that and say it's not too much. And it isn't by the time you get in and get out of it. But that 40 grand that I put in has, if I just look at the 40 grand I started with, has doubled from 320 to 340. So I've made 100% in that 6 years, and that's the way that I look at it. And not only saying that, with the depreciation benefits and the rental yield on it, it's putting $1,000 after tax in my pocket. So I'm getting $1,000 for holding this asset. It's going up, albeit extremely slowly. But I just for me that still makes sense, and I'm not too concerned with it, to be honest.
I'm interested because my first purchase, similar to yourself, was off the plan. Look, it made some money. I also bought in Victoria. I bought a unit in a block in the South Bank. But there's a sort of an intangible to this. It's not just the $40,000 that you've made in equity. It's a move into property. It's embarking on a learning curve, and you've gone on to invest in another 9 properties since then. So I think there's some intangibles there. So it's just getting that sort of first start.
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, to make that step, as I said, my parents' house worth $150,000. I go to them and tell them I'm buying an asset worth $320 that I've never seen, never been down there, and they're like, "What are you doing? Like, shove it under the mattress, put it in a bank and earn your 3%." That's the mentality.
Yeah.
Don't buy it unless you can afford it. So for me, that mental ability to get over that mental hurdle of what my parents would think and what other people thought was a big step. You're right, and once you do it, and you get over it and you actually see the money coming in, you're like, well, this isn't too bad. I don't even have to think about this. I've never had an issue with it. Tenants have been great. As far as I know, it's still there, even though I haven't seen it.
Hopefully they sense it.
Yeah.
Mate, I didn't grow up too far away from where you grew up out in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I obviously grew up with a particular mindset around money, which was based on my parents, and never had much money and stuff. So I've evolved over time in the way I think about money and I think about debt. And I still, even today, I can still feel the legacy of that, and you're obviously influenced around your peer group, and growing up where you did, and that, it would have been very common that you get a house, you pay it off, and that's it. That's the great
100%,
dream.
yep.
So like you start playing pretty good cricket, knocking around with different type of people, probably from different sort of social backgrounds, and I've gone through the same journey. Sort of what's influenced the way that you now think about money and change the way in which that it can actually be an enabler for doing other stuff rather than, we've got to scribble away and hoard it and make sure it's there for a rainy day. How's that worked?
I guess you get all sorts through sport, don't you? You get guys who can be quite frugal with their money, who earn a lot, but you wouldn't notice it. Sort of the quiet millionaires, I guess, so to speak. There's plenty of those cricketers going around, particularly at the moment. And then you get the other guys who, probably spend $2 out of every dollar they earn. They've got the flashy car, they've got the clothes. They'll be the first person to be always heading out and spending their money. So I got this kind of contrast of, guys who are really set up and got balance in their life. And they were the older guys in the squad that if I went and spoke to, wouldn't be forthcoming with information, but if you sort of tweaked them a bit and asked them about it. And the thing that I always saw, even as a 20-year-old, I'd see 31-year-olds' careers just cut short. They'd be captaining the state and then gone at 31 the next year. And I always think, wow, like this can happen like that. And it scared me in a way. So, I always thought that, as good as this seems at the moment, you got money coming in, feel like it's free money, basically playing sport, like you're doing what you love and you're getting paid really good money for it. I just thought, no, don't get caught up in that little devil on your shoulder, wasting it. Remember where you come from. Remember when I was teaching $200 a day, how hard that was to get. I've always had that at the back of my mind. And, by putting into property, it takes away any choices I get with it. Whenever I get a large sum of money, if we do well, it goes onto the house and I redraw it back out. So instead of sitting there with a large sum of money in your bank account going, I can do whatever I want with this, I tend to bring it back down, have your buffer, and then try and live off what you can. It's not to say you don't have fun. I certainly enjoy, I have my enjoyments in life, but I try to relieve that temptation as much as possible because I know that it could easily just go.
It's absolutely brutal, like you could be having a great game today and then tomorrow something happens and that's it, you're on the shelf. And
you're only 2 games away from being dropped and then you're only a bad season away from not getting a contract. That's the nature of what we do, and I've understood that from a young age.
So how many cricketers, so your peer group, do you think have been smart? You read in like rugby league or rugby unions and stuff, like guys in the 80s who they didn't make much money, and then you got in the 90s they started making some cash and they just blew it all and they end up penniless, right? How many sort of cricketers do you think have got, at elite level, have got that good education and they've sort of prepared themselves for life after cricket? I
mean, it's probably hard to say because, they're still going, the guys that I've knocked around with. I come through the ranks with Dave Warner, Steve Smith, Josh Hazlewood, Usman Khawaja. Don't mean to be name dropping, but, Moses Enriques and these guys. And from what I can see is, yes, they've had their splurges, but all of them have generally bought in property and in Sydney 4 or 5 years ago. So regardless of what they've done, they've understood that getting a house is fundamental and key. And I'd say the majority of those guys that I started with have all owned property in some respect. And if they do that, I'm sure they've had the ability to pay it off. And I don't go peering through their finances and start judging them. But I'm sure that they've they have. So I think the general attitude of cricketers is pretty good. I do get worried about the younger guys that come in now at 18 who don't actually understand what it's like to earn $1. Like a young cricketer now, if you're good at 18, 19, you can walk out and you're earning 100 grand, and you lose a bit of that perspective on how hard 100 grand is to earn.
Yeah.
And I think at 18, 19, you generally think that's going to last forever as well. That's probably more of my concern now. I see these guys earning 3 times what I did at that age, but don't have the perspective at all and could blow it. But time will tell. I
was just going to ask a practical question in terms of financing. So most of us earn, have a regular job with a regular income that's sort of fairly safe. When you go along to the banks, so what's the process? How do they evaluate your income and so forth?
Yeah, it's quite tough, and because of the fickle nature of cricket, they want to see prior history of payments. They also want to see future contracts in place.
Yep.
So
how do the contracts work?
So a cricket contract works on a 12-month basis. So you pay 12 months, you get a retainer, which is X amount, and that now for your Big Bash team you'll get one, and for your state team you'll get another. So generally 2 contracts.
Yep.
Which you sign up for. The most I've ever heard of is a 4-year deal, which generally doesn't happen. So it's generally 1, 2 or 3 years, depending on how good you are.
Yep.
And then you get paid player payments on top. So if you play games, you can earn probably another 30%, depending on what you're on, 40, 50% of what your contract is in player payments. So if you play games, you also get rewarded for that as well. So you need to go into the bank with your past pay slips. Tell them how good you are firstly and how good you're hitting the ball and bowling it. No, generally they don't care unless you've got bankers that understand the game. And they'll have their processes. So you go in them with your pay slips, your contracts. And most of the time when I've gone in, I've always gone in with that 20% equity or deposit.
Just as a nice buffer. So you try and go for sort of properties that are around the positively geared sort of...
Near enough or close enough too. And I think that's really achievable at the moment, given the low interest rates. But yeah, most of the time it's been, near enough to that point. So you want to really stack the deck in your own favour and say, right, look, this is a no-brainer. Even if this thing does go down, I've got this amount, I've got that. And I've always had buffers in place. I've never extended myself to a point where I've gone, I'm going to lose sleep over this at night. I could certainly go a lot harder now, but I won't, because...
So it's dictating how aggressive you are in terms of your, sort of your LVRs and how much equity you keep in terms of the actual property. So you're not being too aggressive in terms of the way you're geared.
No, without a doubt. And the bank's all over that as well. I bought 4 in the last sort of 6 months in Brisbane, and the bank was like, just sort of gave me a tap on the shoulder.
Sorry, Steve, you said the bank. How many institutions have you used to fund your portfolio so far?
Just the one. And,
okay,
and
you can say who it is.
Yeah, Bank of Queensland in Manly, Jody and Drew Johnson, lovely,
there you go.
Lovely couple. So give them a bit of a plug. Look, and I know that I know the dangers of doing that, cross collateralising, and if you knock one card in the deck, the whole tower will come down because if you can't sort one out, they've got the luxury of going after all your properties. But I've got enough backup in place. And for me, it was more about relationships. Being busy and on the road, I didn't want to have to ring 5 different bank managers and say, can you sort this out? I need this here. And then go through the 3 or 4 people on the way through, which I'd sort of done in the past when I was with certain other banks, just in general terms. So, I'll be away. They'll contact me after hours, before hours. And, I may pay even a little bit overs of what is normal. It may be costing me. So if it's costing me an extra 3 or 4 grand a year, I look at that as saying, well, that's the cost I pay for having a good relationship and no sleep at night. So I'm comfortable with that. Obviously, everyone's different. As I said, they generally go above and beyond what I would deem, customer service, and they're only 200 metres down the road as well, which helps.
They know you, they know what you're investing in, and I would imagine they give you, having used them for a number of purchases, they'll give you a certain amount of guidance in terms of the finance as well, there's a lot of value in that.
I go in once a week just to say good day and have a coffee with them, and sometimes we don't even talk about money, and I just like the people they are, and of course they're making money out of me and whatnot, but I'll go in, I'll check my rates, and I'll just ask Drew, mate, is this the best you can do at the moment? And he'll go, I'll have a look, I'll sound back, and sometimes they can move a bit. He'll give me a heads up on when he thinks rates might be moving. If I go in and want to lock half, he'll have an idea, and and then we'll chat and discuss it. And for me, it's a peace of mind. You can't put a price on that. And I honestly, while I'm playing cricket, I've got 10 properties, but I want that to take up as much time as possible and less headaches. And these guys sort of pay that premium for that, and I'm happy with that.
I want to have a chat to you about how you manage your property and that, but I think I'm going to have to get you back to do it because we're running out of time.
I'm jipping on for 20 minutes. That's it.
No, mate, it's really good. I'll get you back in about a month or so. You're well under the way investing. Absolutely brilliant. What you've achieved so far is outstanding, and you've obviously done a lot of personal investment in your own understanding of how it works, and you've educated yourself and how to grow, and you're very open to using people to help you do that, which I think is really brilliant. But just to finish up, mate, what do you want to achieve? Like, you've got 10 odd properties now. You're going to keep at it if the banks will continue lending you money, which is good. So you said beforehand you want to retire passively at 45 or whatever it is with X. Is that pretty much what you gear towards?
Yeah, look, it's changed. As I said, it was to pay my house if I got there. Now it's probably 80 or 100 grand in passive income, which I think will provide options and choices in the future. What I don't know, there's nothing really grand about what I want to do. I'm not emotional about property. I just see it as a great tool of making money. So I think that that'll do for now. If the next 5 years turn out and I have a long established career of cricket for Australia or for New South Wales that keeps going, then who knows? I might change that. So I think my goals have always changed. I've been adaptable and flexible with those. And if I retire tomorrow, I'll know that I'll be fine as well because they're all sort of mutually geared. And I can always move to mum and dad's and hassle them. So
sounds all right, mate.
Worst case scenario isn't too bad in my book.
That's good. Mate, Steve, really appreciate you coming on today. Really insightful. I've enjoyed the chat. Alex, thanks again, mate.
Thank you very much.
Always good to have you. Remember, everyone, check us out at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You can follow us on all the Twitter, Facebook and stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at Philip Tarrant. And again, guys, thanks for all the great reviews on iTunes. We're tracking really well, and it seems like everyone's enjoying what we're saying. So check back again next week, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.